originating from the podcast studio inside FAM 360's headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia. This is the Above and Beyond Leadership Podcast. The Above and Beyond Leadership Podcast is designed to encourage, equip, and inspire our audience through a combination of inspirational stories and real-life experiences shared by other successful and skilled leaders in a variety of vocations. We hope that the Above and Beyond Leadership Podcast empowers each one of us to step out, step up, and ultimately thrive as leaders. Now here's our host, Mr. Matt Maloney.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Above and Beyond Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Matt Maloney. I am excited today. Today's going to be a fun day. I get to sit across the table from a friend of mine and also someone who I work with in my career, but in a unique kind of way. Mr. Daniel Steere of Steering Ventures, among other things, and we'll introduce Daniel formally here in just a moment. Before we do, I thought today's quote that I got really embodied the things that Daniel does in his career, and it certainly resonated with me. The quote is from Helen Keller, and she said, and I quote, "It is a terrible thing to see, but have no vision." And I think that resonates not only with just leaders in business, but for our own lives, to not have a vision for our own life. And today's guest, and we'll learn on today's episode and subsequent episodes about how a lot of the things that he does in his life is around building around the vision and helping other business leaders create and construct and live out that vision. And later on, we'll learn about what he's done in his own personal life. So again, Daniel Steere, welcome.
Thank you so much. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here. So, Daniel has been working with me, for the audience benefit here. Daniel's been working with me for the last year or so, about a year. And Daniel is my business coach. He has come in one-on-one with me in capacity to help coach me, kind of guide me. Let him be a sounding board for me, right, on things and problems and issues that I'm dealing with in and out of our business. But also, we kind of went deeper and integrated a program for all of our staff to do some leadership training and development and training. And Daniel's been coming in and doing that throughout the year in different curated sessions that he's put together. And it's really been phenomenal. I have to tell you, it's been great. We've gotten nothing but great feedback. The last session we did, every time it seems like we're getting better and better feedback in terms of just the engagement and what the people are getting out of it. So it's obviously working and working in a big way.
No pressure for the fourth one then.
That's right. Yeah. No pressure.
No pressure at all. All right. Got to bring it.
That's right. So a couple of things. So Daniel is not probably unique like many other leaders, and certainly from an entrepreneurial perspective, although he will tell you that he's still getting used to the thought of being a quote unquote entrepreneur. But Daniel runs 3 different businesses, or is involved in 3 different businesses, at least in a tangible way, where he has a leadership role. And I'll let him talk about that in a moment. But you're a nonprofit, or an executive director for a nonprofit.
Yep.
You are part of a tech startup, which is really cool. And then, of course, Steering Ventures, where you are the founder of that, founder or co-founder of that organization, which is an executive and leadership coaching organization, right?
Yeah, kind of a combination of strategy consulting and executive development.
Yeah, there you go. So, and so I think that in that process, at least for me, you've helped me kind of on my career journey of understanding, how to kind of navigate the journey, the why, of what I'm doing things and trying to impart that why on my people, which I'm really appreciative of, and really, of course, how I'm impacting others. So, why don't you just tell the audience just a little bit about your organization and specifically Steering Ventures and how you're engaged with all these other businesses and what you do?
Okay, so a little bit complicated, but so I'll start with Steering Ventures. So Steering Ventures is a strategy consulting and executive coaching practice. It's just me. I've got a couple of people who help out in kind of a contract capacity, but it's not a big firm. It's primarily just me.
Yeah.
And the origin story from that kind of goes back to my corporate career. I spent a couple of years, in fact, probably the first close to 15 years of my career in large organizations, a couple of Fortune 500 companies, and had a background in doing a lot of corporate strategy stuff, and just found that so often a lot of really good corporate strategies end up being somewhat hijacked by leadership and culture problems.
Sure.
And so I began looking for a set of tools to help organizations kind of bring those two things together, because I had seen projects, I had led projects where the strategy was spot on, but because the people doing the strategy hadn't really considered the cultural and leadership implications of the strategy, it just got put on the shelf.
Yeah.
Right. And it seemed like there was these two worlds of,
it was like a separate thing.
Yeah, there's like these strategy people that have great strategy ideas, and then there's the touchy-feely culture people, and they care about the culture and the feelings and the leadership and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, why aren't these two people talking to each other? Because they're in the same organization. And I just kept seeing more and more frustration. So I was trying to figure out, how do we bring those things together? And coaching ended up being a really good toolkit to help executives really get where they want to go, without self-sabotaging, which sadly happens with a lot of leaders. And so that's really where Steering Ventures kind of came from, is how do I bring the best of executive coaching and leadership development and culture curation with kind of that strategic planning, and bring those in together so that organizations are more likely to actually follow through and more effective in doing so. Yeah,
that's great. And I think what would be really interesting and beneficial for the audience, because you took this leap from working in organizations, right? Over time, Fortune 500 companies in some cases, and then over time, kind of recognizing these, we'll call them deficiencies, or perceived what you thought might be missing in the organizations where they were missing opportunity. And then you took the leap, right, to start this business.
I took that leap several times, to be honest.
Did you? Okay. Because I think it's important for like the audience to understand, because I think there's several listeners that have that idea in the back of their mind, and not everyone. Entrepreneurship's not for everyone, right? But it's like, gosh, I really am passionate about this. I want to do this. I think I could, but they never take that step, that leap, and so. What was it? Was there a moment? Was there an event? Was there something that happened that said, I'm going to take this step. I'm going to take the leap?
I would say I'm one of the most reluctant entrepreneurs I've ever met. So I was working for a Fortune 500 company here in Atlanta, and ended up going out and having drinks with a friend of mine who was a small business owner, kind of a solopreneur.
Okay.
Very successful, doing a great job, but it gotten to the point where his business had grown, where he was just, he's working a ton of hours, making a lot of money, but just like, he's like, I can't keep doing this. And I don't know what it looks like to kind of move this to the next level. And so we went out and we're just talking. He said, I really need to hire a guy like you, but I can't afford you. And I jokingly said, no, of course you can't afford me. But I said, you don't need to own me though. You can rent me. And he just kind of looked at me funny. And I was like, look, you need help. You probably don't need 40 hours a week of help.
Yeah.
So how about I come in and I'll just, I'll put a plan together. We'll walk through the plan where I'll interview your customers. I'll do some coaching. I'll do some strategy work. We'll put a price tag on it that we're both comfortable with. And we'll just spend the next couple of months working together. And he's like, we can do that? I'm like, well, of course we can do that. We can do whatever we want.
Yeah.
And so that was really the first time I had tried to take the coaching stuff that I had learned through a coaching certification and the strategy stuff I had learned in grad school, and trying to blend them together into a strategic plan that's really informed by who he is. And that went really well. And I found that I was enjoying that more than I was enjoying my 40-hour-a-week job. And so... And it worked for him. Like he said, his business grew 70% the next year.
Wow.
While working fewer hours.
Wow.
And so I was like, okay, so that seemed to work.
You were able to help and alleviate some of the other things, challenges that he was dealing with, a divide and conquer perhaps scenario.
So we were able to figure out who he really is. Like, what is it that he really loves doing about his job?
Yeah.
I interviewed his customers and found out what is it that really, like, what's his magic? Like, if you had to distill it down, why do you keep calling him to do these projects for you? And then what are the things that you would say he's probably not so good at? And his customers were pretty honest with me about his strengths and his weaknesses. And I went back to him and I said, look, you need to outsource everything you're not amazing at. And we're not going to get there tomorrow, but let's find that your next hire needs to be somebody who's good at these 3 things, because those things are important to your business. You're not great at them. And if you get those off of your plate, you can do more of the thing that you're actually amazing at. And this thing starts to grow. And I just don't think he'd ever really thought about it that way. But because I spent the time to do personality
most entrepreneurs in small business don't think of it.
Don't think of it.
We think, right, with that we've got to be good at everything. Hey, I've got to have the answers to everything. I've got to be able to do this, and you got to be willing to do everything, but you don't have to be great at doing everything.
Yeah. And he was great at parts of his business, and he was good or okay at the rest of it, but his time was all off. Like, he was spending 80% of his time doing the things he was just okay and good at, and only 20% of his time doing the magic. I was like, dude, we've got to get your magic portion up to like 50% at least. And so once he started bringing in that person that he could offload the things to that he was not great at, his business just started to grow because he was spending more and more time doing what he was great at.
Yeah.
But that takes time to understand how you're uniquely wired. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What's your personality? What do you really love doing? And then we begin to architect a company around that.
Yeah. And
it seemed to really be helpful. So I just tried to find more and more people who needed help, and just kind of went from there.
Well, I mean, it speaks, and that's what you're good at, right? Is kind of peeling back those layers, and then it's almost like breaking it apart and then building it back, right? Is kind of how I think about what you do in many respects from my point of view.
So you're saying that our coaching sessions just break you down?
They just break me down. They break me down. No, but in reality, you help me break down the problem. You may help me kind of get to the root of it and kind of peel it apart, and then come back, and build back to the solution of how we can tackle it. And I think that Daniel has shared with me at points in time, we all have different quotes or things that are important to us or that inspire us or that resonate with us. And he shared with me, and I'll share with the audience here, and you can tell a little bit about, talk to the audience a little bit about that, but about a quote from Teddy Roosevelt. I think it was a speech that he was giving, right? And it was titled "The Man in the Arena." And this part of Teddy's speech, President Roosevelt's speech, I'll present it for the audience here. It says, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena." There's more to it. I'm going to pause for a second. And that is powerful.
Doesn't that just get you?
Oh my gosh. I mean, it gets right to the heart of everything.
Yeah.
Whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there's no effort without error or shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. That I mean, it's a,
I've got goosebumps. We're just going to shut this down right now.
That is it. That's
We're done for the day.
That's a drop the mic moment.
Drop the mic.
I mean, wow. That speaks to, I mean, if that doesn't fire up an entrepreneur, especially because look, leaders all go through times of doubt. I think the number one obstacle that a leader has, the number one, is fear. And fear has many prongs to it.
Yeah.
But one of those is fear that, am I going to fail? Am I doing this right? What do others think about me? All these things go through our mind. But this quote or this excerpt from The Man in the Arena with Teddy Roosevelt during his speech, it's amazing.
Yeah.
So talk to me about that.
This has always been just a very aspirational, influential quote for me. I ran across it, I don't know, at least 10, 15 years ago, and have usually, had it up in my cube when I was, in corporate America, and actually just bought a print of it that I'm going to put up in my house.
Nice.
So it's something that I've kept in front of me. I think why it's so influential to me is because it represents who I want to be. Right? I don't want to come to the end of my life and feel like I've been comfortable. I don't want to come to the end of my life and not see that I've made an impact. And that's going to cost me a lot. That's going to be hard. There's going to be scars. There's going to be failures. But I think that quote does a really good job of framing your options, right? Like, you can avoid failure, you can avoid pain, you can avoid suffering, but you're not really going to do anything with your life. And should you choose that, you will likely have a lot of regrets. You can choose to embrace the fear, the pain, and the suffering, and you might still fail, but I think at the end of the day, there's a lot more satisfaction in that, and a lot more impact and a lot more growth, both in yourself and in those that are on the journey with you. And so that's when I have those dark days and those dark nights of, should I really be doing this? Am I wasting my time? Am I wasting my life? Should I just go play it safe? That's a quote that always helps kind of get me back on the right track.
Yeah. I mean, you're not a human being if that quote doesn't do it. That's powerful. I was talking last night, coaching my son's baseball game, and we were between innings and talking with the kids, and we had an inning where basically every kid, or two of the three, every kid at the plate struck out. Two of the three struck out without taking a swing, and I talked about, guys, we can't have an impact if we're not willing to take a swing.
Yep.
And I mean, that dovetails and kind of permeates across everywhere in our life, right? We can't have an impact if we're not willing to take a swing. And it's okay. I would rather you swing. I told him, I said, I'd rather you swing and strike out than sit there and play it safe and not swing.
Yeah.
And that's exactly the conversation that I had last night. So that's great. Thanks for sharing. So can you just today maybe talk about who, and share with the audience currently today as a leader? Is there a leader out there who you currently look up to, someone that you look up to as a leader? And if so, why?
I have a lot of leadership heroes. Most of them I've never met. A lot of them are from the books that I've read.
Yeah.
I'm also very blessed to have a group of friends and mentors around me that are people that I really look up to and really appreciate. So is this the part where I start name dropping?
I mean, hey, if that's up to you. If you'd like to name drop, name drop.
I'm willing to do it. I would say one, just, and you're going to roll your eyes at this one, but I think it's actually serious. I would put my wife up there as one of the people that I would want to give kind of a leadership award to if I could.
Yeah.
And we'll talk more about this later, but my wife's gone through a lot of health issues. We have a son with special needs and has a lot of health issues. And my wife's had to play left-handed for close to the last 10 years. Yeah. Her natural personality and what her life requires don't play nice together. And so for a very free-spirited, go with the flow kind of person, she has to live a very structured, regimented life. And that's just hard for any of us to kind of play against your wiring over the long haul. But she's doing an amazing job of it. And that's something I admire a lot in her, because when I find myself in those situations, I usually just quit. It's like, this isn't what I'm good at. I'm out. Peace.
And I know what I'm good at. I'm going to go ahead and
I'm going to go do that. And I'm going to stop doing this. And obviously it's her kids. And so she's not going to quit. But I think that's something that I have really appreciated and learned from of, okay, what does it look like to dig in and keep fighting when it's not what you're good at, and you don't know what winning's even going to look like. And so I think that's something I really admire a lot.
That's great. That's great, by the way. And by the way, just to reinforce your lifting your wife up there. I mean, that is, I think that all of us can look at that and look to our wives and the things that they do. And I've talked about this on other podcast episodes. I think God designed it for those of us that believe in the sovereignty of God and God, the creator. I mean, he designed it that women really are the leaders. They're the ones that of all of us, because they're the ones that really help have the most impact on the next generation. For those of us that are blessed enough to be parents. So.
And I would say the other thing I learn a lot from my wife is I'm very naturally more oriented towards tasks than people. And so under stress, I'm not particularly relational. And yet my wife is the one who's consistently challenging me and demonstrating how under stress she continues to lean into relationships where my natural tendency is to lean away. And I think from a leadership perspective, that's becoming so critical right now in the world as it exists today for leaders to learn that in times of crisis, in times of uncertainty, in times of rapid change, that relational connection is the glue that holds organizations together. And I've got a lot of work to do there to hold organizations together with those relationships, because, the vision could change, the strategy could change, the operations could change, the market could change. What will hold people together is relationships. And I easily forget that.
That's great. That's really good. Real quick, I'd like to hear from you because of all your interactions, your exposure with different types of businesses, the leaders and the organizations that you're training, that you're doing business consulting and strategy consulting with. What's the one thing that, from your vantage point, that you feel is lacking in leadership today?
Can I go with two?
You can go with more than you can go with however many you want.
I would say the two things that I see really lacking in many leaders today would be vulnerability and integrity. And so here's what I mean by that. Vulnerability. Many of us have grown up in a world where we believe that the leader has all the answers, right? This kind of strong man image of, oh, well, he's the president or the CEO or the this or the that. And he's great and he's got all the answers and we're just going to go help him. And I work with a lot of those people and they don't have all the answers and they're terrified and they're scared and yet many of them feel the pressure to keep up that image of
that persona that I've got the answer.
That persona, exactly. And I think the vulnerability, it actually works against you, right? That persona, the more you keep up that persona, the more you push people away, the less they trust you, the less they feel connected to you. And Brene Brown has done a lot of great writing and speaking on this, just the importance of vulnerability and to say, you know what, guys, I don't know what's going on. I'm scared. I feel lost. Now, you don't want to start every staff meeting that way, right?
No.
That's a bad idea. But but in the appropriate times to say, look, I don't have all the answers, but we're going to figure this out together. The leaders that are embracing that vulnerability are the leaders that are winning in the 21st century. The leaders that continue to keep up the persona, the facade that I'm a genius, I've got all the answers, and if you just follow me, we're going to win. It works for a little bit, but most of the time that crashes and burns. Yeah, because it's not really sustainable, because it's not true.
No, it's not true. Of course not.
And so that actually ties a little bit into this idea of integrity. And a lot of people hear integrity and they think, well, I'm an honest person, so I have integrity. But if you look at the root of that word and where it comes from, the root of integrity is wholeness, which is different, right? Because it's the idea that you're one person everywhere. There aren't two of you, work Daniel and home Daniel, right? Or work Daniel, home Daniel, and out with my buddies Daniel, right? There's one of me, and I'm that person everywhere. That's, again, kind of that's not the common cultural concept of integrity. They're like, well, my personal life has nothing to do with my work life. Yeah, it does. You're one person. Now, you can try to compartmentalize, but I challenged a client of mine a year ago, and I said, the more you're compartmentalizing your life, the more you're moving away from integrity.
That's great.
And he did not like me for that. He was pretty upset about that one. But he came back to me a month later and said, "You're right. And I don't like it, but you're right."
Yeah.
Because he was a great guy, but in a really bad situation. And I was like, how do you hold such a hard situation, such a toxic situation, 50, 60 hours a week, and then go home and be a dad and a husband? And he's like, oh, I'm just great at compartmentalizing things. Yeah. I'm like, you sound like you're bragging about that, dude. That's not a good
That's not good.
Right.
Yeah.
Compartmentalizing is the opposite of integrity.
Yeah.
And he ended up having to make a change.
Yeah.
And now, months later, he's happy. The company he left is happier. Everyone's doing well, but it was a little bit of a hard truth that felt like I was supposed to share with him. And I think overall it's had a really, really positive impact, but most of us don't think about integrity in that way.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I think people don't think of it that way, but that's great. Well, we are, unfortunately, we're out of time. As we wrap up here, I think we've learned a lot from Daniel. First, we learned about the journey of his career and how he observed things in working in corporate America to really shape who he wanted to be and to take that step to become an entrepreneur and the businesses that he has. So I want to affirm you. Congratulations on all your success. Thanks. On that. We learned from you about really the why for you and who you really want to be at the end of your life, right? At the end of life, who you want, people to remember you by. And that was your why. That's why you took that step and became the man in the arena. Right.
I don't know if I'm quite ready to say I'm that guy. But
but hey, I'll say it. Learned about how in times of conflict and pain and hurt, it's the relationships that are the glue. That's great. And of course, I love what you said about what is needed or kind of missing in leadership and that vulnerability. And Ray Dalio, who is the founder of Bridgewater Associates and Bridgewater Investments, one of his kind of call to actions and which drives his culture is radical transparency. It's something that we're striving to do on our organization. It's one of the things that we look to do and aim to do every day. We're not quite there like his organization does it. And by the way, interestingly enough, of any investment fund, hedge fund, in the last 30 years, his has returned more money to his investors than anyone. And he believes it's because of that radical transparency that he has in the organization. So on the next episode, tune in for part 2 with Daniel. We're going to learn about some of the things that he has learned in his career and that he applies with business executives and how he's really applying it to a whole life approach, the integrity component, as he talks about. Until then, guys, continue to strive and go above and beyond. And thank you again. Bye-bye.